Hi, welcome back to the Rookie's Kitchen. Today on the Rookie's Kitchen, we're making homemade salsa. To start, we're going to need some fresh cilantro, 3 large fresh jalapenos, about 10 Roma tomatoes, 1 red onion, a bundle of green onions, a head of garlic, 2 limes, and a green bell pepper. To get started today, we're going to start with a paring knife. And the first thing you want to do is you want to remove the stem part of your tomatoes. It gets a little tough and woody, and it's not something very good to eat. So you just take your knife, gently put the tip of the knife into the tomato, cut around, angling inward a little bit, and it should just pop right up and out for you, like so. The next thing we're going to want to do is slice down through the tomato. And if you look, we're using Roma tomatoes because they don't have as much seeds and they're not as juicy, so that when we add the lime juice, it doesn't get a really soupy and wet salsa. So we're just going to take and chop up all of our Roma tomatoes. If you cut them longways like that, then you can cut down through and cut them into small pieces. I'm going to go ahead and switch to a chef's knife to make a little bit quicker work of this. Okay, now you cut them into the size that you prefer for your salsa. If you like a hearty, thick salsa, then leave them a little bit chunkier. If you like a smaller, smoother salsa, I'd cut them a little bit smaller. Now you could do this whole thing with the tip of your chef's knife when it comes to taking the core out, the stem part. But I find the chef's knife to be just a little bit too big for that part of the job. So we're going to go ahead, chop up all of our tomatoes just like this, and get them into our mixing container. And I'll be right back. Once you've got all your tomatoes chopped up, you're going to want to move on to the green onions. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the rubber bands off that come with them. And I'm going to check and see if there's any pieces that don't look good, like this. And I'll just pull it off and discard it. Okay, these all look pretty good. So now we need to trim them up. Cut the ends off and discard them, and then you want to take the leaves, the green part, and you want to cut off about 1.5 to 2 inches of that and discard that. Now what you're left with is a green onion. For this one, I'm going to use about 5, so I'm going to have 3 extra. And we're going to chop these, or slice these, very thinly. Now, so nobody gets a great big piece of onion, I'm just going to go across them a couple times and give them a nice rough chop as well. Just to help kind of cut them up a little bit more and make them into more manageable pieces. You don't want giant pieces of onion inside your salsa. That looks pretty good to me. So we'll go ahead and move it to our mixing bowl. Okay, now when you put it in there, it might not seem like much, but you've got to keep in mind, we're also going to put in half a red onion. Okay, the next thing we're going to move on to is the garlic. We're going to use about 4 cloves of garlic today. I'm going to go ahead and use 5. And you want to take the papery part off. It should either just peel off for you. If not, then you can take the garlic, hold your knife sideways, and smash it. And then it should just peel off for you. How easy that is all depends on how fresh your garlic is. And then once we get our garlic all peeled, we're going to give it a nice fine chop and put it in. Now the thing to remember about garlic is it's very strong, so you don't want anybody getting a whole piece of garlic or a great big piece of garlic when they're eating your salsa. So we're going to go ahead and chop the ends off real quick where the roots were. It's going to be from this part of your head of garlic. If you look, you can still kind of see it. Okay. Now we're just going to make sure we get all those papery bits from the garlic off our board. We don't want those going into our salsa. Make sure we give it a real good smash. And then give it a good mince. Smashing it down like that just helps break it down even more into finer pieces. Okay, once you're satisfied that it's chopped up enough, we'll go ahead and add that in to our salsa. The next thing we're going to add is half a red onion. So we're going to chop straight down through this and sit half of it off to the side. And we can save that for another recipe later. Now we're going to chop off the bottom and the top and then peel off the outside layer that's all dried out and papery. Okay. And then make sure we remove all that from our board. Because again, we don't want that getting in to our salsa. Now, to make it easier to chop up an onion, you slice down through it first, not going all the way through the back, so that it holds together still. Kind of like that. And then when you chop it down through, it just dices up really nicely for you. When you get to the back part, you can finish cutting the rest of the way through. If you don't want to cut up some of the bigger pieces, you can take those out. And then we're going to bring it all back together. Give it a nice rough chop too. I like big hearty pieces of tomato, but I like for the other ingredients to kind of come second to the tomato. The tomato is going to be the star in this, and we really want to taste it, but we want to get all these other ingredients chopped small enough that we get a good distribution of them throughout the salsa. Okay, so add our red onion in. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use 1/2 to 2/3 of a bell pepper. So I'm just going to slice down and take off the sides of it, like so. We're going to sit part of it off to the side. We'll use that for something later, or we can even use it to snack on. We'll cut this into strips. We're going to go ahead and set that other piece off to the side too. Okay, those look like they're pretty good sized pieces for our salsa. So we're going to go ahead and add those in, and then we'll chop up that other piece. Okay, we'll do the same thing, slice it into little strips. Like so. And then just chop it into little pieces. If you wanted to give this a rougher chop and make it a little bit finer, you could. Again, that's another thing with personal preference. But I'm going to leave mine a little bit bigger. I'm just going to make sure I add plenty. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is add the juice of our limes. If you roll them like this, you can get them a little bit softer, and it'll also help the juices extract. So slice down through it and squeeze it into our bowl. Now this is an instance where if you have a citrus juicing tool like a citrus reamer or one of the juicers that you can sit it down on and squeeze it out easier, you're more than welcome to use that. I prefer to use as few tools as possible so that I have less cleanup in the end. So I find myself a lot of times preparing this stuff before a party. Now these limes I have are a little bit bigger than what you might find in your grocery store. So if you find some that are a little bit smaller, you might want to grab another lime or two. Or if you find some that are a little bit larger, then you might not need as many. That's entirely up to you, to how much you want to put in. It does help preserve it, and it adds a nice little flavor to it. We're going to go ahead, roll this one out a little bit, and then we're going to juice this one right inside with the other. And this is why I use Roma tomatoes instead of regular tomatoes or slicer tomatoes, is because we're going to get some extra juice from the lime. And then the whole thing's going to create a little bit more liquid or juice to it as it sets and comes together. So Get our lime juice in there. And then we're going to take a minute, clean up a little bit. Clean off the lime juice from our knife. I know it's not good for it. Any harsh acidic things like limes or tomatoes, you want to make sure you wipe off the blade of your knife just so that it doesn't sit on there. Then we're going to go ahead and wipe off our cutting board a little bit. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take some of our fresh cilantro and chop it up in. We're going to take a fairly generous amount. Fresh cilantro gives it a really nice freshness to it. And we're going to take off the stems. Get rid of as much of that as we can. And then just give this a nice chop through. Okay, bring it back together. Give it a good rough chop. Like so. And we'll go ahead and put it in. This is the point where we're going to go ahead and mix it up and give it a little bit of a taste test. At this point, we're going to go ahead and take and mix everything together. Make sure we get it all really well combined. Getting all the way down to the bottom of the bowl to bring those tomatoes up. Try and keep it in the bowl too. Not having much luck with that. This does make a very large amount of mild salsa. And I say mild, but it really doesn't have any heat added to it yet. We've still got our 3 jalapenos sitting off to the side. Okay. So, give it a good mix. And once you think it's well combined, you're welcome to taste it, see if you like it, or see if you need to add something. Now, I typically prefer not to add any salt to my products, but if you do choose to add salt, which will enhance the flavor, now would be the time to do it, and then you give it another good mix through. I'm going to go ahead and add a few generous pinches of salt. Since that'll help break down the tomato and bring all the flavors together. Just make sure you get it stirred in really good. Get everything from the bottom mixed up to the top and the top back down to the bottom. Now, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and take some out and set it aside for those who don't like really spicy salsa. Okay. And we'll set that aside. Now, we'll set this whole thing back to the side, and we'll go ahead and start on our jalapenos. Now, the first thing you do is you want to cut the end off, and you see this inside white part. This membrane, as well as the seeds, are where all of your heat comes from. So we're going to go ahead and slice straight down through this. Okay? And it's your choice if you want to remove this. It can be a little tough, but again, that's where all your heat comes from. So I'm going to go ahead and cut a large part of it out, like so. and discard it. And we're going to do the same for one more of our jalapenos. And we just cut that part out. And it comes out pretty easy, along with the seeds. Now some people prefer to seed out the jalapeno completely, but that doesn't bother me. You can knock out some of the excess if you'd like. Tap it on your board. And then we just brush them off to the side and get rid of them. Now, you want to take, slice it into sections just like we did the green pepper or bell pepper. And then dice it up. This is where you really have your control over how much heat you add. If you like it even spicier, you could add a habanero pepper. Or if you like it a little milder, you could only add one jalapeno pepper. I'm going to add 2 today. And I have a 3rd here if I need it and I think it's not spicy enough. Now this goes just like the garlic. You don't want it really big pieces, but you want them big enough to taste, just like your onions too. So that when they're biting into it, they get the heat, but they don't get a mouthful of jalapeno. As much as some people like it, not everybody does. So you don't want to do that to somebody. Not everybody can handle the heat as well as others. So we go ahead and chop this up really quick. Now, once you get your salsa done, it's best to let the flavors come together for about an hour or 2 in the refrigerator so that everything can combine. Let's mix in those jalapenos. That looks really good. Make sure they're evenly distributed. And we'll move our spicy into a bowl. I am not having luck today with not hitting all this glass stuff together either. So we'll move this into its bowl. We'll reserve some back because you made it. You deserve to eat a little bit of it. Okay. Out like that. What I'm going to do, so that we can tell the spicy from the mild, is I'm just going to slide the jalapeno pepper whole, like that, into the bowl, so that everybody knows that this one's spicy. Now, we'll take a minute, we'll put this in a small container and save it back for us, and we'll clean everything up. And I'll be back in just a minute, and we'll taste it and see what we think. Now that we've got everything cleaned up, it's time to grab a bowl of your favorite corn chips. I'm using scoops for this one. I've got both a mix of multigrain and regular. And we'll give it a taste and see what it tastes like. Try to get a little bit of everything in there. That one is very good. Now the adventure is in the hot one, because you don't know which parts of those are green bell pepper and which part's jalapeno. So you might get a mouthful of jalapeno, or you might get a mouthful of bell pepper. You never know. We'll see which one I get. Next time you have a family get-together, make sure you bring your favorite chips and some of this delicious fresh salsa. Check out our last video too. We made guacamole. Another great dip that you could take to any of your friends' parties this summer or any of the games this fall. Thanks for tuning in this week. You have a great day.